I am Mike Kirst. I'm a professor emeritus at Stanford University School of Education, and I am the current president of the California State Board of Education. My area of work has been in federal and state education policy, and this is my 51st year of doing that, and my 4th term as president of the California State Board of Education. So I began in 1964 in the Johnson administration and then worked for the U.S. Senate, and then I came to California as professor at Stanford and had my initial run in the State Board of Education with Governor Jerry Brown from 1975 through 1982. So I've reflected a lot on what I've learned over this long career in terms of federal and state education policy, and I'm delighted to share it today. I started with a view that, of course, I was going to go to Washington and change the world and improve education, and we did a lot. We created the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The civil rights laws were enforced through education. We spent a lot of money, federal money, and we did have impact during that period of focusing people on disadvantaged children and their needs and effective programming. But I soon learned that the limits of federal policy, that it's a very long way from a federal office in Washington, D.C. to a classroom. And what really matters in many ways is improving classroom instruction. And if you're not improving classroom instruction, then even though you can provide free lunches and preschool and all of that, you're not going to get to the essence of education. So I was delighted then to get the state appointment at a state level in Sacramento as president of the California State Board of Education in 1975. And I thought, well, I'm closer to the action and I'll do more at the state level. And we're a very strong state. California, for example, adopts textbooks in kindergarten through 8th grade, and the districts use those textbooks. We had an aggressive assessment system, even in the 70s, and we had a large focus on professional development. And we were able to move the system somewhat, but again, I learned that the instruments and policies that the state government has are blunt, can move people in general directions, but are not fine-tuned enough to affect classroom instruction and to really improve it. So we pushed harder on professional development, but professional development, I learned, is of very varied quality. Some of it is good, some of it's terrible. We left a lot of it to school districts, and they tend to use it in too shallow a way, with no follow-up in the classroom, with no collaboration among the teachers. So I learned from that somewhat how hard it is, again, to change classroom instruction. I also learned that to change education from the federal and state level, you need to create a constituency at the local level that will support the change and sustain it. We tried a lot of what are called categorical grants, earmarked funds in California. Some of them had a temporary impact, some of them lasted because they created a constituency. Special education is a good example of a powerful constituency that made things last. Vocational education had a strong constituency that weakened, so it tended to go away. And driver's training, for example, had a weak constituency and it went away. So my work is also focused on what state and federal reforms last, which ones go away without much of a trace, and which ones come back and cycle back. Ebb and flow, it's called. Professor David Tyak and Larry Cuban worked on this with me in understanding this. So now, to speed things up, after working on a state education policy think tank in California and nationally, I got my second chance at state office, and what we're doing now, I think, is more sophisticated and has a better chance of lasting. So what are we doing? We're thoroughly aimed at the long-run change in the classroom through enhancing state policy instruments that can help that. But the change has to be local, so the state role has to be, yes, some accountability. We need to know which schools are doing well and not doing well. But for every ratchet up of accountability, you need to ratchet up equally capacity building at the local level. So we come back to professional development, back to principal leadership, and how that will work. So the first thing we did in California was to decategorize lots of the funds. We had about 40 categories that we funded at the state level, tended to chop everything up in small pieces. We decategorized that through a local control funding formula. And then we created much stronger linkages for the locals to figure out how to improve instruction. So they have to do a local control accountability plan aimed at instructional improvement and pupil outcomes. So we pumped more money into the system. We've created more teacher networks. We've refined our views on how professional development can be effective. And I think at that point, we're really beginning to move this forward. Our watchwords, and this would be my overview, are patience, persistence, and humility. It takes a long time to change schools and improve instruction, so you have to have patience. On the other hand, you have to have a set of initiatives you're working with: capacity building, professional development, teacher networks, principal networks, school leadership. All of those you need to persist. We're looking at Common Core being a 5 to 10 year process. And finally, humility. In the 50 years, I've learned what I don't know as well as a few things I do know. But actually improving classroom instruction is complex, has many factors. You need to blend the federal and state policy and instruments you're using with the local context. You need to adapt to the local context with your state policy. And you need to then learn to learn and how to learn and proceed with humility. So that, I think, is my main lessons, and I think federal and state policy has a robust and positive future as we've learned a great deal over a half a century.